Hello humans, I am the Black Cat and welcome to Weird Wednesday. Today we take a look at Bridget Cleary, the Irish fairy wife. So this story takes us back to March of 1895 in the town of Tipperary, Ireland. Bridget Cleary was a 26-year-old woman who was married to Michael Cleary. They had no children and shared a cottage with Bridget's father, Patrick Boland. Bridget would make money by working as a seamstress and selling eggs. Back in the 1800s and even today, people have a very strong belief in spirit beings such as fairies or fae. And we're not talking about cute little winged fairies. Irish legends of fairies would be more like humanoid trickster spirits. The legend goes that fairies would sometimes take human babies and replace them with a replica or changeling. The changeling would resemble the human they replaced but wouldn't be quite right. They'd be slightly off. Bridget was apparently fascinated by fairies and would often take walks to areas thought to be fairy hotspots. One such place was a ring fort that was close to where her cousin Jack lived. A ring fort being a medieval circular fortified settlement believed by some to be a fairy fort. Bridget may have visited this fort on Monday, March the 4th of 1895, when she went to deliver eggs to her father's cousin. When she got home, she complained that she couldn't warm up. It had snowed the previous day, and she also claimed that she had a headache. She apparently stated that she had a raging pain in her head. So she went to bed early and stayed there. By Saturday, her father went to fetch the doctor, but he wasn't able to visit until the following Wednesday. The doctor eventually did visit and diagnosed her with nervous excitement, whatever that means, and slight bronchitis. Sounds reasonable, the bronchitis part at least. However, her husband, Michael, didn't agree with the diagnosis, and that he believed his wife was 2 inches taller than she was before. He apparently judged this by how much space she took up in the bed. On Wednesday, the same day that the doctor visited, but later in the afternoon, a priest visited. He apparently wasn't overly concerned about the illness, but decided to administer the last rites just in case. The ceremony apparently convinced Michael that he might lose his wife, which distressed him even more. Jack, the cousin, advised him to go to the fairy doctor, or if he didn't, he would lose the real Bridget forever. Jack apparently told him that it's not your wife there. This is the 8th day and you've had a right to have gone to the fairy doctor on the 5th day. So apparently the fairy doctor visited the next day, gave Michael a mixture of herbs that needed to be boiled in new milk, the nutrient-rich fresh milk produced by cows after calving. That night, Michael forced Bridget to drink the mix while Jack and 3 other male cousins held her down on the bed. Relatives outside of the house heard somebody they assumed was Michael shouting, "Take it, you witch, or I'll kill you." The men apparently threw urine at her and shook her, yelling at her, "Away with you, come home, Bridget Boland, in the name of God." Other relatives and neighbours came and went, witnessing her ordeal and hearing her screams, but were too scared to intervene, probably because there were 5 grown men there holding her down. Michael asked his wife to answer her name 3 times. "Are you Bridget Boland, wife of Michael Cleary, in the name of God?" The men apparently then brought her to the fireplace and held her over the grate. While they were holding her over the grate of the fireplace, they also continued to question her. By midnight on Thursday, the ritual seemed to have been completed. Michael apparently was satisfied at this point, and the relatives thought there had been some kind of settling down of the situation. The following morning, Michael asked the priest if he would say Mass in Bridget's room in order to banish the evil spirits that may have been left in the house. On the Friday, March the 15th, after 11 days of being in bed, Bridget got out of bed and dressed in her usual fashionable clothes. Several family members had joined them in their cottage for tea later in the day when an argument erupted. Bridget had apparently asked for some milk, which made Michael suspicious because apparently fairies are known in folklore to yearn for fresh milk. By this point, not surprisingly, Bridget was getting tired of all the questions, which made Michael even more furious. He demanded that she eat 3 pieces of bread and jam. She apparently ate 2 pieces of bread, but she hesitated before eating the third. This enraged Michael, and he flung her to the ground and threatened her. "If you won't take it, down you will go," he said. While she was on the ground, Michael jabbed his knee into her chest, forcing the bread and jam down her throat. He tore off her clothes, leaving only her underclothes on. He then grabbed a hot stick from the fire and held it close to her mouth. He struck her head on the floor. Within a few minutes, it set her undergarments on fire, and then proceeded to pour lamp oil over her to encourage the flames. As she was burning, Michael said to their relatives, "She's not my wife. She's an old deceiver sent in place of my wife." The relatives obviously yelled at Michael to put the flames out, but Bridget, according to their testimony, blazed up in a minute. They huddled in fear in a nearby bedroom, and the flames were blocking their way of getting out. Once the flames had died down, Michael wrapped her body in a sheet and shoved it in an old bag. He then left the house, leaving the relatives inside with Bridget's corpse. They waited for about an hour. When Michael came back, he was wielding a knife and threatened to kill Bridget's cousin Patrick Kennedy if he didn't help him bury Bridget's body. "Come on out here now," he shouted. "I have the hole nearby made." The 2 men carried the body to a boggy area about a quarter-mile up the hill from the cottage and buried it in a shallow hole. Afterwards, Michael made the rest of the family swear that they wouldn't tell the authorities. The next day, Michael arrived in Drangan Church with Jack. Jack wanted Michael to speak to a priest, but when the priest saw him kneeling in front of the altar, he was apparently weeping, tearing his hair out, and asking to go to confession. The priest decided that he was unfit to receive the sacrament. He spoke to Jack instead. Jack wasn't at the cottage at the time of Bridget's death, but told the priest that Michael had claimed to have burnt his wife the previous night. "I've been asking them all morning to take her up and give her a Christian burial," Jack said. Of course, the priest reported them to the police. For a few days, police searched for Bridget and questioned family and relatives, even though Michael spoke about immigrating or committing suicide in order to escape the law. He still hoped his real wife would come back. For several nights, Michael waited at the ring fort, where he believed that his wife would appear galloping on a white horse. He said that he would only have to cut the ropes that bound her to the animal. By Wednesday, March the 20th, the Royal Irish Constables issued arrest warrants for 8 people from Bridget's circle, including the fairy doctor. A couple of days later, the police found Bridget's body. The people involved were brought before the magistrate on March 25th. The courtroom was apparently filled with curious onlookers because the story had been reported in the newspaper. So, on the 5th of July in 1895, after a 2-day trial, Michael was found guilty of manslaughter and imprisoned, along with Jack, the cousin, Patrick Boland, and 4 of Bridget's cousins, including Patrick Kennedy, the young cousin who buried her body. The judge decided not to charge them with murder, however, explaining that they had all acted out of genuine belief. Michael was released in 1910, after which he boarded a ship for Montreal. Jack served a 3-year prison sentence before returning home to the area. Michael apparently stated, "God knows I would never do it but for Jack. It was he who told me my wife was a fairy." And that's not an excuse, not a reason. You don't kill your wife just because somebody else told you anyway. So apparently one thing that may have caused friction between the couple was the rumor that Bridget had a lover. Michael apparently told reporters that his wife, quote, "used to be meeting an Eggman on the low road," which is not a euphemism. However, other rumors suggest it may have been a caretaker named William Simpson. Apparently, Simpson did arrive at their house the night before Bridget's death when he saw the 4 men restraining her, and he had asked them to leave her alone. Obviously, they didn't listen. Another theory is that Michael may have been suffering from a psychotic state known as Capgras syndrome, most probably mispronounced that, which involves the belief that a person has been replaced by an imposter. Michael's belief that she had been replaced by a fairy would fit in with this category. He apparently was convinced that burning his wife was an attempt to cure the situation, getting rid of the changeling or the imposter, and encouraging his wife to be returned. Apparently, the imposter changes from either a different person or a supernatural being depending on the cultural context of where the person's from and their belief systems and things like that. I guess in a way that also brings up the question of accountability. Like, it's kind of a grey area. Like, if you genuinely believe something. And I'm not specifically talking about Michael here because he had threatened to burn her in the past, so I think that's, I don't know, I think he might have been looking for an excuse. But anyway, it brings up the question, if you genuinely believe, like, someone's a threat or something, does that justify killing? Or if you genuinely believe, you know, like in possession, for example, like the, what was her name? Like the case that the exorcism of Emily Rose was based on. Because of her religious upbringing, she genuinely believed that she was possessed. Personally, I don't think she was, but that's me. I've been brought up a different way, so I have a different belief system. So, like, for example, just purely theoretical situation. If somebody believes that there's an intruder in their house and they shoot them, only later to discover that it wasn't an intruder at all, it was actually a family member that they accidentally shot, can they be held accountable for killing the family member when they genuinely believed that it was an intruder and that they were under threat? It's it's a grey area that would be difficult to judge, because how do you prove somebody's beliefs? You can't see inside their head. So yeah, I'm not sure. It's kind of like, in my opinion, if Michael genuinely believed that she was a changeling, he would have made more of an effort to find the real Bridget instead of destroying what he believed to be the changeling. And then as soon as he got out, he took off, apparently. So I don't know if he really believed it or not. But again, you can't really say what somebody else genuinely believes or not. Anyway, those are just my thoughts. He certainly didn't seem to take much encouragement for him to jump to that point. He only had a couple of suspicions, and then somebody suggesting that she's a changeling, and all of a sudden, that sounds right. What? No. So yeah, it's possible that he had some issues before that. Apparently, he had threatened to burn her before this whole thing happened. So yeah, maybe he wanted to get rid of her and was just looking for an excuse. Either way, at the end of the day, Michael and the cousins pretty much got together and killed his wife, Bridget. I don't believe she was a changeling. Do I believe in the stories of changelings? I don't know. Do I believe in fairies? I'm not going to rule it out. It's certainly a possibility. Do I think this is a case of a fairy changeling? No, I don't think it is. I think Michael had some issues with his own, way of thinking, and she was probably going out regularly, maybe, allegedly, seeing this other guy, plus her fascination with the fairies and the fairy fort. I think all these things combined just escalated the situation, so unfortunately. But should they have been charged with murder or not? That's a good question, because apparently even after he was released from prison, he still believed that she would return and would still wait for her to return. That was one side of the story that I saw somewhere. Another side of the story I saw was that he left the country after he was released. So, not sure. But anyway, that's all I have for this mystery. Let me know your thoughts, and I'll catch you next time. Bye!